So this is one of the case manager resources I have. This one is on analysis related to the development of the DSM-5 criteria for substance use related disorders. So the words on this are really small. I don't even know if I'll be able to read it. Background. A number of changes have been proposed and investigate in the criteria for substance use disorders in the DSM-5. However, although clinical utility of DSM-5 is a high priority, relatively little of the empirical evidence supporting the changes was obtained from samples of substance abuse patients. Proposed changes were examined in 663 patients in treatment for substance use disorders. So I'm just going to read this part and then maybe the introduction a little bit. So, in treatment for substance use, evaluated by experienced clinicians using a psychiatric research interview for substance and mental disorders. Factor and item response theory analysis was used to investigate the dimensionality of psychometric properties of alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, and heroin abuse, and dependence criteria and craving. Results. The 7 dependence criteria, 3 of the abuse criteria, and craving form an undimensional latent trait for alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, and heroin. Craving did not add significantly to the total information offered by the dependence criteria, but adding the 3 abuse criteria and craving together did significantly increase total information for the criteria sets associated with alcohol, cannabis, and heroin. Conclusion. Among adult patients in treatment for substance disorders and alcohol, with the alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, and heroin criteria for dependence abuse and craving, measure a single underlying dimension. Results support the proposal to combine abuse and dependence into a single underlying dimension. Results support the proposal to combine abuse and dependence into a single diagnosis in the DSM-5. Omitting legal problems, mixed support was provided for the addition of craving as a new criteria, warranting future studies of this important construct in substance use disorders. Ooh. Okay. Introduction. Changes proposed to the substance use disorders in the DSM-5 include dropping the legal problems criterion and abuse criterion in DSM-4, adding craving as a new criterion, and combining the 7 DSM-4 dependence criterion and the 3 remaining abuse criterion. And craving into a category for a single disorder. Justification for dropping legal problems included low prevalence in adults and adolescents in general, low discrimination in adolescents, poor fit with other criterion, and little added substance use disorder information. Theoretical justification for adding craving, including the view of some that it is essential to substance use disorder and that it can cue drug self-administration leading to relapse. Craving has been studied in animal and human laboratory models. The consistency of DSM-5 with the ICD-10 would be improved by adding craving. Natural basis makes it an inviting pharmacology developed target. Whew. Justification for combining the dependence in 3 abuse criteria is found in many studies showing undimensionality of the dependence in 3 abuse criteria for alcohol and drug use disorders. These studies largely use item response theory analysis, although other methods were used. Participants in these studies were adults in the general population, with additional samples of students, adolescents, and emergency room patients. Among studies that included craving, latent variable models showed that the craving fit well on an undimensional latent variable with other DSM-4 alcohol criteria in the US and Australia, general populations, and also in emergency room patients in several countries, but was redundant with other substance use disorder criteria, thus not adding much information. In addition, in the US general population, adding craving increased the DSM-5 substance use disorder prevalence by 0.05%, thus not casting a wider diagnostic net. Okay. I think that's interesting. These studies consistently support an undimensional model, but their applicability to clinical populations cannot be assumed because the criteria are likely to be disrupted differently in patient and non-patient populations. Earlier studies in clinical samples addressed earlier nosologies. Wait, what was it? Oh. Earlier clinical studies did not include complete or any coverage of DSM-4 abuse, or measured dependence criteria with a diagnostic instrument, and abuse in a different manner. Several studies mixed patient and non-patient, varying analytic strategies across these studies reflected the evolution in latent variable methodology during this period. These studies were inconsistent on the number of content of factors obtained and did not directly answer the questions at hand for the proposal of the DSM-5 substance use disorder changes. More recent studies along patients in the NIDA clinical trials network showed good evidence for undimensionality and little evidence of differentiant item functioning of demographic characteristics for the DSM-4 alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and opioid dependence, but did not include abuse. Holy crap. Whew. So, what were the methods for this study? For this study, the sample included 663 patients, recruited from an inpatient community psychiatric hospital treating co-occurring substance and psychiatric disorders. Methadone clinic and an outpatient counseling program. To be eligible, patients must have used alcohol, cocaine, or heroin within the last prior 30 days. At each treatment site, clinical staff identified eligible sequential admitted patients and obtained their agreement to meet the research staff who explained the study. Okay, so they were studying basically, they were using these 663 people to look at the changes for the DSM-5 in relation to substance use disorder. And we do actually have some nice charts here. They have so this is actually a little longer than this article is, a little longer than I planned. Okay. So, except for legal problems, which we're aware, the prevalence of all DSM-4 criteria and craving was high, ranging from 27 to 52 for alcohol, 12 to 29 for cannabis, 29 to 73 for cocaine, and 30 to 73 for heroin. Hazardous use, while endorsed commonly across substance, was among the low prevalence criteria. The prevalence of craving was similar in magnitude to the DSM-4 dependence criteria, except for cannabis. The total number of criteria per patient for each substance was distributed by modality. One mode with no criteria and the other mode at 9 or more criteria. Alright. So that's the basis for this article. As I said, there are some nice graphs that show. I love graphs and these kind of things because they show the counts of alcohol criteria, the count of cannabis, count of heroin. You can't really see them well though in a video. So you probably didn't see those at all. Really, this one's even smaller as far as discussing. Let's see. Yeah, this one's even smaller, so I don't know. But anyway, thanks for watching.